everybody. First of all, I'm really sorry, Adrian. I feel like we've given you a bit of a challenge on the name front. We go by first names here. I think we should just stick to first names. It's great to be here. It's a bit awkward to be in the panel that's called storytelling, because I do feel like everything's been about stories. We were just saying backstage, every single panel we've seen over the last 2 days has talked about stories, and there's a good reason for that, which is how powerful stories are. And I'm very lucky to have incredible women around me on the stage, and we're going to talk about how some of the stories they have seen and they have told, and how they use storytelling, some of the techniques, some of the tips that they would give you all when you think about storytelling in your old world. Because of course it's not just about media, it's not just about campaigning. Storytelling is around us everywhere. Here's my story today. I have pockets in my dress. That's a fashion story. I'm so excited when I discovered that. So we talk about stories and the impact it has a lot. And before we get started with this fantastic panel, I just want you all to have a moment to think about a story that made you change your perspective on something. And it could be gender related, ideally, but it doesn't have to be. It was a story that suddenly made you think, oh, actually, I never thought of it that way. It's right. And just keep it in your head as we go through this, because these are the stories we want to tell. We want people to pause and think, oh, that's interesting. But let's share some amazing stories, and we're going to go through some good stories, because we also need those, and then start talking about how to make these happen more often. And I want to start with you, Andrea, because you sort of represent traditional mass media here. Is that fair to say? You work in TV, you work in film. Tell me a good story.
I mean, advocacy is storytelling.
Yeah.
You know, this is one of our greatest tools for culture change, policy change, shifting norms. I know we're talking, specifically about gender norms today. And often when we talk about narrative change or this kind of norm shift in entertainment media, film and television, as you said, we sort of talk about two spheres, kind of the social impact sphere. A lot of that encompasses documentary or, films that you watch that you think this has a purpose, right? That's like the healthy food. And then there's the sort of mass media, when you turn on Netflix and you don't really know what you want to watch and you're scrolling through and you click on something, and that might be more of the junk food type content. But both of these spheres have social impact, right? So whether for good or ill, we are having gender norms reinforced through what we're watching and consuming, or we have the potential to have them shifted and have our minds changed. And I mean, this is why I work in film. This is what drew me to it. I remember hearing this quote from Roger Ebert, the great film critic and journalist, about film as an empathy machine. And I think this is why narrative storytelling is such a powerful tool in our advocacy toolbox. It is that incredible ability to put yourself in someone else's place, someone else's shoes, to build bridges between communities, and to shift, long-held beliefs. And the way I like to break it down in terms of the unique power of narrative media is that it can impact us on a personal level, so our personal behavior, our personal belief, as you said, that idea of I thought of something one way and then I watched this film and now I think of it in a different way. It can have that impact on the cultural level. So as we said, shaping norms or, starting conversations in community, right? And then there's the structural level. So where what we're watching and how that's impacting us can actually roll up to the structural and societal change. An example, I also work within the movement to accelerate LGBTQ acceptance in media, and that is a tool for social change. And one of the examples we still refer to is the TV show Will and Grace, which is an American network television show that many, many researchers and lawmakers have attributed to the successful movement for marriage equality in the United States. That this network television show that was in people's living rooms on a consistent basis helped them to develop these parasocial relationships with LGBTQ people, and for people who had not had those relationships before, this had a huge impact. So that's one of many examples of that sort of mass media level change. But I also want to say that as we note those positive examples, we have to also clock the negative ones. So the ways that the media that we consume has shaped our beliefs, perhaps in negative ways. And I feel like this is the theme that's come up a lot in the conversations so far this week around the polarization, the contribution to just the propagation of certain beliefs, and particularly when it comes to gender norms, right? I think about the representation of gender-based violence in media and how that shows up in what we watch, and that contribution to that issue. And so this leads me to the last thing I want to say in response to this first question, which is about the other pillar of advocacy that we do at Women in Film, which is around who gets to tell their stories with this much power behind it. So how are the voices that are authentic to a particular experience able to actually be amplified across media? We can't just talk about narrative change as the story. It has to be about the storyteller. And we're still talking about an industry that is extremely underrepresentative of women across the board, particularly in decision-making positions, writing, directing, but really, across the board. So these are the things that I want to sort of situate us in, from looking at the impact of what I would classify as sort of narrative media on this conversation.
Do you mean there have been more Disney CEOs named Bob than there have been Disney CEOs being a woman? So see, you work in a very specific area of journalism that's very solutions focused. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that pushes you to try to create impact through storytelling?
Yes, I can go on and on and on and on
I'll
on
stop
this,
you.
but I'll try to
have
stay
a timer.
Yes. So I'm Swati. I'm from India. I have been a freelance journalist for the most part of my life, and I also train and mentor journalists from all over the globe at the moment, and I do something called social solutions journalism. And solutions journalism can be across any beats, any domain, any kind of stories, any genre. It talks about solutions, but through an investigative lens, where we are not only fluffing up constructive measures, not only talking about things that are working, but we look at it from the angle of evidence. What evidence do we have? What limitations are there? Why the solutions are not working 100%? Because as we know, like the perfect husband, the perfect wife, the perfect solutions don't exist. So we have to highlight what is not working and how we can bridge the gaps. This information, the insights for the solutions, come from this complete, total, deep coverage of any response to long-standing problems in the society. And this is so important in today's world, more than ever, because we have problems galore. And we are tuned to look into problems, to dig into problems, but looking at solutions, finding solutions, what to do, how people are tackling them, takes a different mindset. It's a very women thing, I think, sometimes, because we do it all the time in our families, in our societies. We just need to rev it up. We just need to bring it up into the focus more and more, because people are doing stuff. People are doing things to change the world. Small things, tiny things, but they are making impact. And we need to talk about these responses to social problems, health problems, education problems, violence issues, climate change issues, all of these, to bring into focus that people are doing stuff. There is hope. And as the Solutions Journalism Network co-founder David Bonston says, solutions journalism gives us hope with teeth. It's not just something to look forward to. Things are happening. We can claim it. We can imbibe it. We can take it forward. And which is why we need to tell the complete story, the whole story, without any bar, and not just a good part. We need to talk about what is not working, where it comes limitations and insights about the solutions. or response that is happening. So, and of course, the evidence. So that is the crux of it. And okay, I'll stop.
But I think that's really important. And in fact, one of the co-chairs of the conferences here, Janet Mbugua, see, I'm struggling with names too today. She did something like that in Kenya, where she highlighted period poverty and the impact it was having on girls' education, and the impact of that story and the way it was told was so powerful. I'm going to come back to you to ask you for more examples, but Christina, tell me about your work and how story is so central to it and what it does.
So with Girl Rising, we use the power of storytelling to change the way societies value girls and girls' education. And we've sort of moved from the mass media place to really using stories in communities. We work with local partners and we help girls build skills, confidence, agency, and to shift the way they think about themselves and their place in the world. And we work with all of those around girls to also shift the way they think about what girls can be and do. And stories are one of our most powerful tools. Our curriculum, our engagement tools are full of stories about real people from all around the world. And I'll tell a particular story. The setting for this story is a rural village in Rajasthan, a place in India where 25% of girls are married before they are 18, and a much higher number drop out of school before they finish secondary school. And in this village, we were working with a local partner who worked with all of the different stakeholders that I just mentioned. And with a group of teachers, they had this group of teachers watch a film every week and discuss the themes in the film. It was a film that we made about girls from all around the world. And this male teacher, on about the third week, they'd watched a film that told the story of a young woman in Nepal who was sold into indentured servitude. Slavery, essentially. A practice that's outlawed, illegal in Nepal, but still practiced. And in this story, there was a teacher who saw this girl and began teaching her to read. And then it launched her into her education and beyond. And he said, after that story, I realized I was part of the problem. I had no idea that the way I treated girls and boys in my classroom, what I asked them to do as tasks, the girls went to wash the dishes, the boys got to go out to play, the way I treated them academically was reinforcing harmful gender norms. It was what you said at the beginning. It was an aha moment, a kind of moment that can only come from powerful stories, not from lecturing, not from talking about how you should teach and should not teach. It came from a story, walking around in somebody else's shoes and gaining perspective about something that was in his world that he had never thought about and never talked about. It was making the invisible visible and giving him a new perspective. So that's just one story of thousands that we have where we have experienced and seen people who watch a story, are able to engage in conversation about the story, and then it shifts something inside of them. You know, it turns out the reason stories are so powerful is we are hardwired as humans to learn from stories because it hits us not just in our mind, but in our hearts, and it's able to shift something and build empathy, as you said. Stories are empathy machines.
I love that. Make the invisible visible through stories. I think that's a great mission, isn't it? Mandira, you do that, but you do it at a slightly different level. You do it through campaigning, advocacy. Tell us a little bit about how that works.
Sure, thank you, Claire. And I work with Purpose, which is a global agency that does creative communication and creative campaigning around the world. And in India, and I'm going to cheat a little bit, I'm not going to talk about one story, I'm going to talk about millions of stories.
That's fine.
And I think what we forget is very often just the act of telling or being able to tell your story is radical. For many women around the world, they don't even get to tell their stories. And so I think that what we do really well and what was very critical about, and I'm going to talk to a piece of work that I'm exceptionally proud of, which was called Khud se Puche, which meant ask yourself. And the idea is that we needed to build a campaign on women's health care. But nobody had actually talked to women about what they wanted from their health care. Nobody had actually considered that women had the right for respectful and dignified health care. And so the campaign started by actually creating a space for women to tell their stories. And in telling those millions of stories, they started to form connections. And they started to build trust about a very stigmatized and sensitive and often hidden or invisible issue. And we started to do exactly what you said. We started to visibilize something that was horribly invisible across a society. And in doing so, we created Safe Harbor, because often just telling your story allows you to just breathe, right? Just in the fact of sharing it with somebody else and putting it out in the world is a safe space and a safe harbor for women who do not get rest, who do not have space to, talk about what matters to them. And then we created connections. We created the ability for women to feel that they were heard. And in doing so, we created new language. And that's what stories do. They allow us to create a new language around issues that haven't been spoken to before. And so very, very important. And that comes back to, I think, what all of us have been talking to about whose story are you telling, the authenticity of those stories, being able to use stories to build that empathy across individuals, but also across cultures, and use them to bring people together, to say that we have more in common and less apart.
Well, I hope you're all inspired, because I am, and I think that's what we want. That is what we're talking about when we talk about the impact of storytelling. Yes, we know the negative impact it can have and the amplification, and we heard Maria yesterday talk about these sort of networks and how that works. But actually, the right empathetic story puts words on the unsaid, makes the invisible visible, and gives the context that you need to understand the story. We're running out of time, which is really annoying, because I have like a million other stories I want to hear. But I'm going to talk. You have to be really quick. Let's show the world that women can be efficient. Everybody in this room has stories to tell. They have stories that they have been told that has inspired them. What's the one thing you would tell them to think about when they think about the impact of storytelling? Andrea.
Something we've heard a lot about in these last couple of days is how the distribution of information has shifted so dramatically because of technology, because of the way we live and work and interact as societies now. And I think what we need collectively is innovation about how we can deliver this nutritious, artistic content that is going to help us grow in positive ways to people who could benefit from viewing it, because our systems are currently not set up that way, right? It's an algorithmic situation where you can only see what you want to see if that's how you're approaching the technology. And so we, I think, really need to come together collectively across sectors. We need funding to make that possible and develop those new innovations and approaches to how media storytelling actually reaches audiences. So it's not, for me, it's not a question about do we have the stories or do we have the juice, do we have what we so do. Like in this room, in rooms like this around the globe, we have the words, we have the heart, we have the stories, we have the storytellers, but what we don't have is the platform and the delivery mechanism for how people are interacting with those stories.
Okay, fantastic. So think about the distribution. Yeah. Mandira, I'm going this way. I'm changing the
I'm going to quit because I have this timer ticking down right in front of me, which is a bit scary. But I'm going to say there are three things. Stop looking for the perfect story. All stories, look for the authentic story. Investment. Invest in stories. Invest in women being able to tell their own stories. Let's put the money there. And then finally, I would say, let's start talking to a new set of people. We have seen recently that we are talking to the same sets of people and it's not working. So let's find new audiences. They may not be the people we would like to be talking to, but we have to speak to them.
Of that. Thank you.
I'll say two things. One, hand over the mic.
Yeah. Okay.
So we all have platforms and abilities to show up at conferences and to speak truth to power and invite people whose voices are not heard, particularly women, particularly young women, to tell their stories. And two, I'll reiterate what the others two have said here, which is funding. If any issues we care about, we need to fund storytelling about those issues. People think of storytelling as sort of soft and squishy. It is not. It is like a lightsaber. It is powerful. So let's use that lever as best we can.
We need money to build our lightsabers, people. So we'll be waiting backstage for the checks. Swasti, do you want to?
The timer has run out.
Don't look at the time.
So I have all the time.
You're way too disciplined.
I have all the time in the world. So I'll just reach out to all of you, audience, all the amazing women and men here. I'll demonstrate what we need in a story. If I just tell climate change, how do you feel about it? Use this or this? Climate change?
Yeah.
Yes. If I talk about gender violence, how do you feel about it? If I talk about, gang violence, how do you feel about it? Right. Okay, I'll give you a little bit of something here. If I talk about somebody building an organization to bring gang members, individuals affected by gang violence, into their fold, giving them therapy, giving them education, giving them means and resources to build their life away from the violence into a fulfilling society. How does that make you feel? Yes? So that's context. And that's solutions journalism. Because we are highlighting what people are doing, maybe in very small measures, about the problems in our society. But then don't get fooled. Look at the context very deeply. Look at if the response is thorough, presented well, you have all the questions answered. Look for the evidence, because most fluffy stories will not give you the evidence that something is working. Look for the evidence and look for what is not working. Because when we talk about what is not working and how much is not working, there is room for improvement. It gives us tools to take these solutions ahead in a changed context and see if it works better there. Context is everything. Keep your minds open.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody. Please give it up for our great panel. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me.